You're now listening to Boomsies with Dan O'Toole on the Bet Rivers Network.
It's cold in this basement. One day I'll be out of the basement. Mommy? Welcome to Friday. In what has been a stellar run of shows here, we had Dave Mercer on last week, talking fishing. We had Tom Green on Boomsies this week. Next week, we've got Kevin Burkhardt, the lead voice on the NFL on Fox. Ernie Witt's on next week. And today, we have the man that all Canadians have grown to love because he is the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays. That man is Dan Shulman. Dan, a few reasons I love you. You're a great broadcaster. Your name's Dan. And when you appeared on the old podcast with Jay and I think, if I remember correctly, you also said your favorite Jays team of all time, like mine, is the 1985 Blue Jays.
It would definitely be a team back in the 80s, and maybe that's just, what meant a lot to us when we were young is what means a lot to us for our entire lives. But I would say 83, 84, 85, when they really got good for the first time. I remember 77, 78, 79, not to sound like a dinosaur or anything, but when you started to see Bell and Mosby and Barfield and Upshaw and Garcia and Fernandez and Mullenix and Steve and all these guys get good in 83, 84, 85. Those teams were great. And that was a phenomenal team. Still to this day, it holds the franchise record for the most wins in a season with 99. So, yeah, that was a pretty special team.
And not pandering to the crowd here, but getting back to the name Dan, I had this conversation with another Dan the other day. I'm like, have you ever met a Dan you don't like? And I'm like, I don't think I have.
Huh. I've never thought of that. I don't know about you. I actually, in 90% of my life, I'm Danny, and I prefer to be Danny. Now, I don't come on air and say, hi, this is Danny Shulman here at Rogers Center, because then I sound like I'm in grade 4 or something like that. But I prefer people to call me Danny. Most of my family calls me Danny. I don't know about you.
I get a lot of Dano. A lot of buddies call me, Dano, what's up?
I never get Dano. That's funny. I've never been a Dano. 2 people called me Daniel. The late, great Jim Hunt called me Daniel, and Bob Elliott calls me Daniel. But everybody else is Danny or Dan. So I'll have to think if there's a disagreeable Dan that I've ever met. I'm not sure about that. I'll ask, Danny Jansen is about as nice a guy as you'll ever meet as well. So there's another one. So, yeah, I guess we've got to uphold the name. My
plan here for my little town of Orono, Ontario, is to have a Dan Fest, where it's all Dan-related things, headlined by the Dan Band, who I think they're the band that plays in The Wedding Singer or one of those movies. They're an actual band. So there'd be a lot of Dan-related things like a nap area, whatever else we'd have, and all Dans would get in free. So we would hope you would attend that. If this ever happens, I doubt it ever will, but if it does, we want your attendance.
I'm in, and if there's a nap area, I'll be the first in line. I promise you that.
So we speak to you. You're in Kansas City. Are you sick of barbecue? Do you still get barbecue when you go to KC after all these years?
I'm going to disappoint you here. I'm not a barbecue guy. And I am a carnivore. I'm a steak guy and a hamburger guy, but for whatever reason, I'm not a barbecue guy. And about 10 minutes ago, just before you and I started talking, I received and finished my Uber Eats make-your-own salad from a place. So with me, generally, eating starts great in the morning. It's pretty good at lunch. And from 4 p.m. on, it's a disaster. So, and that's a function of, being in arenas and ballparks for years after, year after year after year, and then occasionally making some poor choices after games as well, which I shouldn't be doing at my age anymore. So I hate to not feed the narrative, but I'm not a barbecue guy. And I try to get my greens in early because it gets worse as the day goes along.
Okay. So that leads me to a question from my mom, Sandra O'Toole. I said I'd be talking to you. She said, by the way, I love them. Dan and Buck, they always have a conversation going. It's so lovely to listen to. And her question was, do you eat at the ballpark?
Yes. I mean, not everybody may eat, but I do. So at the Rogers Center, there is as you know well, there is a media dining area, and I'm usually in there to grab something quick. Sometimes I take it back to the booth at say like 5:30 before the game. That's kind of the general deal. If it's a 7 o'clock game, you're at the ballpark by 3. I don't know about other people. Buck actually can go a long time without eating. He can go a longer time without eating than I can. Sometimes he skips dinner. I can't do that. So yes, I always grab a meal. It's one of these things you go in, you pay your $12 or whatever it is. You got 3 entrees and a little salad bar. If you're lucky, a nice dessert. Grab a little bottle of water or Diet Coke. Head back to the booth and eat it there. And it's funny because all of us baseball broadcasters are the same, which means we're self-absorbed and infantile. Basically, we the main way that we evaluate ballparks is by the meals. Actually, how good is the sight line for how well can you see the field from the booth, and how good are the meals? Those are the two main things we talk about. So, because I'm a picky eater, so sometimes I struggle. I don't do well at whatever the White Sox ballpark. I can't keep track of what it's called anymore. But whatever the White Sox ballpark is, that's not a good one for me. But here in Kansas City and at home in Toronto, I do fine.
You mentioned the sight lines. How many foul balls have you caught, if any, in the booth?
Caught or picked up after they stopped rolling?
Or, ended up with.
So in Toronto, I've never had one. The booth is high at the Rogers Center. It's a good question. At Old Tiger Stadium, which is no longer in existence, we were so close to home plate. If you looked at the back, it had one of those cork boards behind. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if that's still a thing anymore. And it looked like somebody had, shot holes in it. There were so many baseballs that had come in and hit the back of it. It was all dented but I got lucky. None ever came in while I was broadcasting a game there because you really wouldn't have time to react. You were so close to home plate. At the same time, your adrenaline was so high and you were so focused because, you had to be on your toes because you were so close. I think I've had a couple in the booth. I have never caught one on the fly. That I know. Absolutely, I've never caught one. That I would remember. Some of the booths are too high. Boston, Pittsburgh, Washington, Atlanta, Toronto for the most part. So, you'd think I've had more. Doing this for 28 years, you'd think I'd have all kinds of great stories. But I guess my best foul ball story is way, way, way back when in the 1990s. I'm walking down the left field line in Dunedin at the Blue Jays spring training facility. For some reason, I was walking out like an entrance by a gate deep down the left field line and was not paying attention, which is on me. I know better. Batting practice was going on, and somebody hit one, and I'm 300 feet away down the left field line, and it hit me right in the back of the right shoulder. So fortunately, It got me there and not here. But that's probably my best foul ball.
I thought you were going to say you Kevin Mitchell'd it and just barehanded it.
No. I've had 2 foul balls hit me right in the hands when I was in the seats. And I've been charged with an error on both of those plays, unfortunately.
As a baseball broadcaster, the pitch clock must be a godsend because in the back of your mind, you're like, we got less time to fill.
Yeah, I'm for it on a number of levels. I was for it before it came in. I thought it would kind of have the impact that it does. My son did minor league games last year, so he would like text me. Every night he'd say, we're through 6, and he would know like we're in the 4th. He was just being, just rubbing it in a little bit. So I don't think we've lost anything really that we, can't live without. Now, check back in Game 7 of a championship series or the World Series. Is it going to feel rushed then? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think we've lost 25 minutes of guys standing around and adjusting their batting gloves and stepping off and doing this to the catcher, start the signs over. The game has a much better pace. The biggest reason I like it is I think more people will like baseball because of it. I think more people will watch and stick around. I think it's a more entertaining product. And there are other rule changes as well, obviously, that have started this year. But also, if I can get home at 10:45 instead of 11:15, my dog is 30 minutes happier too. Daddy comes home a little bit earlier. So, but I like it. I don't feel rushed. I just feel this is good. And Buck and I still have time to do stories. Somebody tweeted at me last night, people were worried there wouldn't be time for stories. Dan and Buck are talking about the Brady Bunch on air. Everything is fine. So, we still have time to get some stuff in between batters here and there.
And it's not a focus of the broadcast. We've got a small sample size so far, but it's not as prevalent as I thought it was going to be. I'm like, okay, there's going to be a massive clock that we see ticking down, but no, it's not like that.
No, you see it on what we call the bug, the score bug at the bottom of the screen. If you're in the ballpark, I think there are 5 different pitch clocks around the ballpark. You see it on the bug, I believe, from 10 seconds down. It's kind of like a shot clock in basketball. You might see it from 10 or 7 or 5 or whatever different networks decide to do. And the shot clock, in a way, is kind of a decent analogy. Like, there was a time there was no shot clock in basketball. And right now, that seems like the most insane idea that anybody could ever have. And there were college games that were 12-8 and 6-4. And how could anybody go watch that and be entertained by that product? So I'm sure when the historians, look back at this 50 years from now, they might giggle and say, "You didn't have a pitch clock? God, the games must have been long." But I think it's great. And obviously, I'm sorry, excuse me. Obviously, you bring it in spring training, and it gives guys 6 weeks to adjust. And other than one spring training game where I think we had 9 violations, on average, it's been like one a game. I don't think we had any last night. A few guys are calling timeouts, but that's no big deal. They used to step out all the time, and now they can only do it once, and even very few guys are doing that. So I think I saw last year the average time of a game was 3:06, and so far this year it's like 2:41 or something like that. And that the last time games were 2:41 was 1984, I believe. So we've gone almost 40 years back in time in terms of the length of games. And again, you and I are of a certain age. When we were kids, you only had a couple of things to do. You could ride your bike or watch a game. Those were the only 2 things we knew how to do. So if you chose to watch a game, you watched a game. Now young people can do 30 things at the same time. You've got to keep their attention. And I think the game moving quicker is good for that.
You mentioned Buck and telling stories. He has now one of the most recognizable voices, I believe, in Canada. So it's so distinct. Do you ever find yourself getting lulled into like a haze when he's speaking in the booth?
No, I wouldn't say so, but you're right. I mean, his voice is distinctive. His hair is distinctive. I mean, when he walks around, I mean, my lack of hair, I guess, is distinctive, but his hair is more distinctive. And listen, he's been a part of Toronto almost nonstop since 1980. I believe it's 82. I believe is the year that he came to Toronto. He's an icon in Toronto and across the country. He has been a broadcaster. He has been a manager. He has been a player. Like, he's done everything you can do. So, it's funny, Dan, the first time I got the job at TSN in 1995, and I was a kid. I was 28 years old, and I didn't really know Buck. We did an audition together, and I got offered the job. And I'm sorry, we did the audition together, and I did not get offered the job. And 3 months later, from like November to February, I get a call back in February. Are you still interested in the job? And of course, the answer was yes. And biggest break I've ever gotten. And for whatever reason, from day one, even though we didn't really know each other, we just kind of clicked on the air. And I'll never forget, one of the first things he said to me is, if we can make this sound like 2 guys sitting at a bar talking baseball, watching a game, we'll be all right. And I think of that every single game that I do. And we didn't work together for a long time. I was with him from 1995 through 2000. And then he became the manager in 2001. And I left the Blue Jays to go to ESPN full-time in 2002, and I didn't come back till 2016. So we had 14 years between doing games together, and I swear by the second inning of that first game in 2016, it felt like, no time had passed. So I'm very fortunate. I think we're very fortunate that we've got that on-air chemistry, and hopefully people like it.
When you're calling games with Buck, is there a park that you find, I wish this place got more love? Because we got Wrigley, you've got Fenway, you got PNC Park in Pittsburgh. Those are the iconic ones now that people say, okay, the great sight lines, everything like that. Is there a park that maybe doesn't get as much love as it deserves?
Yeah, well, Oracle, which I think is what the Giants Park is called now, that gets love, and deservedly so. You know what it is? It's funny now. It used to get all the love in the world, and deservedly so, and it doesn't as much anymore. And that's Camden Yards. Now they kind of messed up in left field with the way they changed the fence, and they wanted to reduce offense, make it a better pitcher's park. But other than that eyesore in left field, like Camden Yards was the park that changed parks.
That's right. Camden came in like a year or two after the Skydome, right?
3 years, right. Skydome was 89, I believe. And then I think what they originally called New Comiskey was 91, but they kind of missed the boat on New Comiskey, in my opinion. I think Camden Yards came in 92. Now, the Orioles were really good then, too, right? I think you're still in the Cal Ripken and all that. So, and then after Camden Yards, it was like boom, boom, boom. Texas got one. Colorado got one. Seattle got one. San Diego got one. Cleveland got one. Like that architecture company nailed it, and everybody hired them and said, build us one of those. And so Camden Yards to me is still the park that kind of spawned all that. The other one is Cleveland. And again, I still call it Jacobs Field. I believe it's one thing, as you can tell, I'm lousy at is what is the name of the of ballparks right now. But I think it's Progressive Field right now. But Jacobs Field to me is great. It's just whenever I seem to be there, it's misty or snowing or something like that. It's not typically great weather. But those parks are both from the 90s, and I still think they look great. And I'll tell you another beautiful one is Target Field in Minneapolis. I'm a big, big, big fan of Target Field in Minneapolis. I don't think it gets a lot of attention when people talk about the nice parks out there, but I love going there and doing games there.
And the three parks you just named, Cleveland, Boston, Minnie, are all easily accessible by Canadians, so that's perfect.
Yep.
Who was your go-to play-by-play voice growing up that you hung on their every word when they were calling a game?
Tom Cheek is the first guy I can think of. I mean, I'm born and raised in Toronto, have lived there my whole life, other than I went to Western. April 7th, 77, April 6th, 77, I probably wasn't a baseball fan. I was 10 years old. April 7th, 77, I loved it from the moment it started. And Tom Cheek was there, and back then, as you know, there weren't that many games on TV. What I think I remember is kind of Wednesday night and Sunday afternoon. You would get the Blue Jays on TV, and the rest of the time, it was radio. So as a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kid learning baseball, Tom Cheek was the guy that I learned it from. My bedtime as a kid would be based around what time zone the Blue Jays were in. I could stay up a little bit later if they were in the central time zone. If I, did what I was supposed to do and finished my homework when they went out west, maybe I could stay up a little bit later than that to hear the Mariners game or the A's game or the Angels game. And this is not an exaggeration. As you know, Tom Cheek was literally on every single game. He did 4,306 consecutive games. So I would have to say Tom Cheek. I mean, I'm a big fan of some of the guys who I grew up with listening to a lot in the U.S. as well. Harry Kalas for the Phillies, Ernie Harwell for the Tigers, Jack Buck for the Cardinals. And then I got to meet all of them, a little bit later on in life when I started calling games. And I got to work with Tom, which was as special and intimidating for me as anything. So I'd say those guys. I mean, those are all legendary Hall of Fame baseball broadcasters, and they all had an influence on me.
Sounds like you and I lived the same childhood, because I skipped out of my brother's graduation to go listen to a Jays game on the radio once because I'm like, I can't miss this game. So I sat in the car while everyone else was at the graduation ceremony and Tom Cheek on the call. And then later in life, when I got into broadcasting, I was up in Fort McMurray, Alberta, doing a little 1-hour Saturday sports show. And I reached out to Tom Cheek, and Tom Cheek came on my damn show. I'm like, I am no one. And he came on and spent 20 minutes talking about whatever with me. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah. It's funny. Again, I got to know him quite well through the 90s when he was still doing radio before he got sick, and I was doing TV. And he was a big guy, as you know. I mean, I'm a pretty big guy, and he's bigger than me. He was bigger than me, and a booming voice. And he could be intimidating without meaning to be intimidating. But he was a big teddy bear. He really, really was. Kind of gruff on the outside, but if you started digging a little bit, he was a big teddy bear, and he was wonderful, like beyond wonderful to me. And Jerry was as well, beyond wonderful to me from the moment I showed up, because I just kind of, fell into this without meaning to. And all of a sudden I'm at CJCL and I'm doing pre and post game shows, and I'm down at spring training, and then I'm doing the games on TSN. Like, it all happened pretty quickly. And both Tom and Jerry were absolutely wonderful to me.
Dan, a real quick rapid fire, then we'll get you out of here. You ready?
I'm starting to sweat. I'm starting to feel
easy.
Pressure here already.
It's very easy. What's your Tim Hortons order?
I don't go into Tim's very much anymore, but if I would, I would probably get like a chocolate glaze and a French vanilla. That's what I
Okay.
got. That's all I got for you.
French vanilla. That's also Tom Green's order. He was on recently on Boomsies.
Oh, good to know.
Best park to call a ball game.
Wow, that is so hard. I'm going to say, let's say it's October and it's a playoff game, right? Like, so everything is heightened. I'm going to say Wrigley Field. Wrigley and Fenway, like they're just in a separate category. Maybe it's because I've been to Fenway 1,000 times because they're in the division that the Blue Jays are in, that Wrigley just edges it out as being a little bit more unique and a little bit more special to me.
Best travel city that you guys go to?
Chicago and Boston in a dead heat. I love, love, love both of those cities. Will never, ever miss a road trip to one of those cities. They're both great walking cities, great food cities. And again, if we're talking Cubs, you're talking Wrigley and Fenway. So you got the great ballparks as well.
Have you ever been starstruck by a player?
Well, Daryl Sittler, I'm switching sports here.
No problem.
If you go back to Little Danny, it's all hockey, and it's Daryl Sittler. Like, you may think it's coincidence we have the same initials, but let's be honest, it's not. So I was starstruck when I met him the first few times when I was still working at CJCL and doing talk shows and interviews, and I would bump into him every now and again in the airport or at a charitable dinner or something like that. So I would say Daryl Sittler the most, and then was very fortunate to meet and interview Hank Aaron a couple of times and was starstruck then as well.
Have you ever eaten anything or drank anything before a broadcast where you're like, oh, I can't do that again?
I have a no Mexican food on game day policy. So yes, so I love Mexican food, but it just seems like, why roll the dice? I was doing a junior hockey game in Kamloops, British Columbia for TSN in 1990 something. And I don't know what I ate, but it's about the sickest I've ever been in my life. And I missed the second and third period. And it happens. People don't need to hear any more about that than I've already said. But I try. I'm a pretty bland, plain eater anyways, but I try to be even a little bit more so. Also, if I'm eating pasta, like you're going to see it on my shirt before we come on camera, I'm that guy. So I try to just keep it very clean, very plain.
Another question from my mom, Sandra. Do you ever get tired of being on the road and in hotel rooms so much?
Sure. Absolutely. Anybody who says no is lying. I have kids and missed a lot. I have 3 older boys and a little guy. And when the 3 older boys were young, I missed a lot. And I always say anybody who unconditionally loves travel doesn't travel. And it's wonderful. I mean, I have nothing to complain about. It's just you do get tired, time zones and did I leave that jacket in the closet? Where is it? Why are there no rental cars? Just things like that, like stuff all of us go through. You just go through it a little bit more in my line of work. So absolutely. And 2, I'm 56, traveling at 56 is different than traveling at 32 or something like that. Your energy is not quite the same. So yes, tell your mom, Sandra, that yes, that first day I come home from a road trip and get to go to sleep in my own bed, that's always a good thing.
Okay. So let's end with this then. What's your best travel tip for packing or for picking hotels or for whatever? What is the greatest tip you can give someone who's traveling?
So I don't know if you're a notes guy or a list guy. On my phone, I kind of have pack these things, Danny, and I just kind of go down the list, and I've got like the 3-day trip and the 7-day trip and that sort of thing. It just helps me not forget things. Inevitably, I'll do it a little bit. I would say that, and absolutely 1,000%. For every flight you are taking, make sure you sign up for notifications in advance to know if your plane is delayed. And don't only do that, click on the where is this plane coming from and sign up for notifications for that flight as well, because you'll find out about that one 2 hours earlier and you'll save yourself a lot of time at the airport.
Dan, you're the best. And once again, I've never met a Dan I don't like, so I appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Let's keep that streak intact.
Danny, good job. No one calls me Danny. Oh, no, wrong. Knuckles Nyland. Chris Nyland calls me Danny. He's the only one that calls me that. And I'm not going to tell him to call me anything else because he could decapitate me. Although I once said that to Mike Tyson. He was on our show at Fox. And I said, if you hit me as hard as you could in the head, would you break my neck or decapitate me? And Mike Tyson looked at me and says, you're stronger than you think. And I'm like, Mike Tyson just gave me a pep talk. So maybe I'd do okay against Knuckles. Thanks for tuning in. Big week next week. We'll see you then.
Welcome to Boomsies with Dan O'Toole. Live from Orono in the heart of Ontario. Oh, baby, Boomsies.
Thanks for listening to Boomsies with Dan O'Toole on the Bet Rivers Network.